It's always very exciting to get a new teaching aid in the classroom. But when it's something as apparently complicated as a computer, it can be a little daunting. So what we'll try to do during this videotape is to run through the basic parts of the computer, what they're used for, and to give you some examples of the sort of teaching that the computer can help you with. Now, typically, the first computer setup you'll get will be similar to the one I have here. We'll have the computer itself, we'll have a tape recorder, and a monitor or screen of some kind to work with. So let's look at the individual parts one at a time, and we'll start with the computer. Now, if you've used a typewriter before, then most of the keys here will be familiar to you. The central section of the keyboard contains the letters and a certain amount of punctuation. Across the top line we've got the digits from 1 to 9 and 0. But surrounding that part of the keyboard we have some extra keys, and so we'll have to look at each of those individually to see what their function is. The most important of these is probably the return key, which is the equivalent of a carriage return on a typewriter. And we tend to use this to end an instruction that we're typing into the computer. Our instruction won't be acted upon until we've pressed the return key. Now, just above the return key, you'll see 4 keys with arrows on. You probably won't need to use these very much unless you're writing your own programs. They're called editing keys, and you'll find them useful if you're writing statements in BASIC and wanting to change them. And the same applies to the delete and copy keys below. Over on the left-hand side of the keyboard, we have caps lock, shift lock, shift and control. Now, you won't use control very much, but these shift and caps lock keys and the shift key have an effect upon the way the characters you type on the keyboard will appear on the screen. Just below these keys, you'll see a row of 3 lights. One marked caps lock, which is lit at the moment, and one marked shift lock, which isn't lit. If I press the caps lock key, the caps lock light will go out. Press it again, it will come on. Press the shift lock key, the caps lock goes out and the shift lock comes on. Press shift lock again, and they're both off. Now, these affect the way the keys you type will appear in the computer, and as a result of that, on the screen. And I'll show you the difference. The screen here is telling me that the computer is waiting for me to enter a command. Now, when the machine is first turned on, the caps lock light is on, telling me that we're switched to caps lock. So if I type letter keys, I get capital letters. But if I use the number keys at the top, I get the normal digits. I'll use the delete key to rub out those characters. Now I'll show you what happens if we turn off caps lock accidentally or deliberately. The light goes off. We still get numbers when we use the keys at the top of the keyboard, but any letters we type now come out as lowercase letters. Let's rub those out and press the shift lock key. The shift lock light comes on. And although we still get our capital letters, instead of numbers, we get the symbols above the numbers. So that if a program was expecting us to type in a number, and we thought we were typing 1, 2, 3, and we typed exclamation mark, quote, hash symbol, then the program might not know what we were talking about. This is in fact one of the biggest problems with typing information into computers. fact that it may not be in exactly the format that the program expects. So do take the time to check out how caps lock and shift lock work on your machine. And when you get a new program to use, test it to see how tolerant it is of different characters being typed in. If both lights are turned off, both caps lock and shift lock, then we can obtain capital letters or the symbols on the tops of the keys by holding down the shift key as we type. Holding down the shift key causes us to get capital letters instead of small ones. So it's very important that you either check to make sure that the right lock is switched on, that the right lights are turned on, or that you're using programs which will accept both capital A and small a when they ask for the letter A. At the top of the keyboard, you see a row of 10 red function keys. And although these serve no major purpose when the machine is first switched on, they can be used by programs you buy for particular purposes relevant to that program. But the instructions for those programs should tell you what they're used for. But at the end of that row of keys, there's a key marked break. And this is perhaps the most fragile part of the system, because pressing the break key will restore the machine almost to the state it was in when it was turned on. So if we have a program running, and instead of using one of the other keys, we accidentally press the break key, we get this. The program is terminated, and we're back to the initial screen we got when we turned on. If the program is a basic program, it's possible to get it back. We type old, which tells the computer to look in its memory to try to find a basic program. If we now try to run the program, this time we're lucky. The program is still there. But you should always try to avoid letting anybody use the break key. So the keyboard is our main way of communicating with the computer. We put commands in through the keyboard, and we'll feed in information through the keyboard. The screen, on the other hand, is the way that the computer is going to provide us with information. Some of it textual information, and some of it graphic. Now the text can be in one of several different sizes, and we have a choice of colors. So let's look at some of the combinations of size and color to see which ones are effective, easily recognized, and to see which ones we should try to avoid. Well, the first thing we notice about the machine is that we have a choice of how many characters we can put across the screen. In this mode, we've got 20 characters across the screen. The characters are fairly large, if a little squashed looking, but they're very clear. We've also got a range of colors we can use. Black, which we've got for the background at the moment, white, light blue, purpley, blue, yellow, green, and red. Now if you sit and look at those colors for a moment, you can guess for yourself which are going to be easiest to read, which are going to stand out best. That's those colors on a black background. Let's see what they look like with a range of different colors of background. On a red background, the white is still fairly clear, but you'll find certain of the other colors become rather blurred. On the whole, red is best avoided, certainly in large areas on the screen. Trying to read things on a green background also is extremely difficult. The blue stands out fairly well, but most of the other colors are not good. A yellow background, again, not very good. Blue background, purple background, light blue, and a white background. Again, if you're writing a program for yourself, or if you're looking at a program that somebody else has provided for you, check the use of colors. Have they used suitable combinations of colors to make the information on the screen readable, or have they just made it confusing by the use of too much or the wrong colors? Well, as I said, here we have 20 characters across the screen. By using a different mode, a different typeface, we can get 40 characters across the screen. If we do that, the characters look like this. The height of each character remains the same, but they've been squeezed in sideways so that now we have 40 characters going across the screen. Again, we have combinations of colors that we can use, and as I change these colors, you'll be able to gauge for yourself which color combinations are effective and which are not. We can go right down to 80 characters across the line. I've printed the same number of characters as I did before, but they've been squeezed smaller yet again, so that we can now get 80 characters across from one side of the screen to the other. You must remember that the picture that you're viewing on your video player is not as good as you would get directly from the computer. But certainly, if you have 80 characters across one line, it becomes very difficult to read the text from any distance away from the screen. This is another mode known as teletext mode, or mode 7, whereas you'll see the characters are very clearly drawn. This mode also has the advantage that it uses up very little of the computer's memory that would otherwise be used for program. And you may recognize these characters as the ones you might see on your own television if you use teletext, Presto. So there's a fairly wide range of forms of character that the computer can display. And of course, as well as letters and numbers, we can draw various types of picture in various colors. And we'll see some more of those a little later. And the last essential component of our system is this, the cassette recorder player, which is used for storing programs and for storing information. Well, that's the basic hardware, the machinery. But none of that is of any value to you without software, the programs that make it do something useful. Now, you may have the problem of deciding what programs to acquire and what programs to use in the classroom. And this will depend very much on the way in which you're going to use the computer, because it could be used as a tool for an individual child, one at a time, or perhaps for small groups, 3 or 4 children at a time, or you could use it yourself as a teaching aid to the whole class. And different types of software, different programs that you may get, are better used in one way or another. Now we're going to look at a selection of programs which are aimed at helping with the education of small children. And some of them will be useful for the individual child, and some of them you can use as a class teaching aid. Now the first one we're going to use is from Acornsoft, and it's called the Tree of Knowledge. Well, let's start by looking at the screen as it presents itself to us. Now this program allows a class to build up their knowledge about a certain subject. It allows them to make a list, make what you might call a database in computer terms, of any subject you like. It could be fruit, trees, animals. And it helps their skill in developing their questioning, how to distinguish one thing from another. Now I'll show you first a demonstration of a database that's already been created, and then we'll see how you might use it to create a new one within the class. I'll load in a tree or a database from the cassette. The one I'm going to use is called fruit. Now we play the cassette, and the information that's stored on the cassette will be loaded into the program. Well, there's our initial choice of things we can do. As we're going to use the information that comes with the program, let's just take it from the beginning and we'll think of a fruit. And I'll think of a nectarine. So we'll type 1, which is the first choice on the menu. Are we thinking of a fruit? Yes. Does it have a stone? Yes. Does it have a smooth skin? Yes. Before we go on, let's just see what the program is doing. It's continually asking us questions which will eliminate one type of fruit from another. And we hope that when we've answered enough of the questions, it'll be able to give us the fruit that we were thinking of. Let's carry on. A yellowy-orange flesh? Yes, it does. Yes, it's a cross between a peach and an apricot. Is it a nectarine? So by analyzing the information we've fed in, by deciding between yeses and nos for each question it was asking, it's been able to narrow our choice down to a single fruit. Yes, it was a nectarine, and back again. Let's type no, we're not thinking of a fruit, and look at the other choices on the menu. The second one, to guess a fruit, well, the computer thinks of a fruit, and we'd have to guess it. Number 3, we could use to change some of the questions if we didn't like the way they were phrased. Number 4, print out the tree. Let's choose number 4 to see how this information is held within the computer, because that will give us a good idea as to how we could use this program on a subject of our own choosing. Let's choose number 4. Yes, we would like to list the whole tree. We won't list it to the printer, we'll list it to the screen. And here you see the beginning of the tree. Here in red are the different questions to distinguish between different fruits. And in yellow, you see the names of each of the fruit. As we work our way through the tree, we come to this point where we have the very first question that was asked. Does it have a stone? Yes cuts out half of the fruits. No would cut out the other half. Now this tree has had quite a lot of work put into it. It's got a lot of fruit and a lot of questions. At the bottom you see the message, press escape to return to the menu. We'll do just that. That's given you a basic idea of what the program is and what it does. Now, how could you use something like this in your own teaching? Well, this is a very generalized sort of tool, and you could use it fitting in with almost any type of study. Let's suppose you were working on animals. If you were doing a project on animals, then you could build up your own tree of knowledge, your own database, which included different types of animals. And it would be good mental exercise for the children to be able to work out the sort of questions they'd need to ask to distinguish between one kind of animal and the next. Let's start an animals database off, just to see how you'd go about the process. We'll choose option number 7, start a new tree. And we'll call this new tree animals. Yes, we're happy with the title. The singular of animals, an animal. Please enter an animal. Well, we start by thinking of 2 different animals. Let's take a cat and a rabbit. And here comes the first question. We have to think of a question that will distinguish between a cat and a rabbit. So this is the point at which you can ask the class, and this can involve you in a fair amount of discussion. But let's suppose we take the question, has it got long ears? Has a cat got long ears? No. Now we're back to the initial menu. Let's try thinking of an animal to see if those 2 work. Let's choose option number 1. Are we thinking of an animal? Yes. Has it got long ears? Yes. Yes, it's a rabbit. Well, let's say no to that question and think of a new animal, because we can extend the tree by adding more animals and more questions at any time. Let's choose option 1. Yes. Has it got long ears? Yes, it has. Is it a rabbit? No. Because we're thinking of a donkey. Having put that animal into the tree, we have to give the computer a question which will allow it to distinguish between the new animal and the previous animals. A question to tell the difference between a rabbit and a donkey. How about, does it live in a burrow? Does a rabbit live in a burrow? Yes. We can test that the question and the new animal have gone into the tree successfully. Yes, we're thinking of an animal. Has it got long ears? Yes. Does it live in a burrow? No. Yes, it's a donkey. If we return to the main menu, you can see that option 5 allows us to save this tree. So at the end of any session or any lesson, we can take all the animals and all the questions that we've thought of about them, we can save them onto a cassette. When we load them in at a later time, they'll all be there and we can extend it even more. Let's choose option 4, just to look at the tree that we've got so far. Yes, we'll list out the whole tree. And here you see it. Rabbit, donkey, and cat are our 3 animals. Does it live in a burrow? Has it got long ears? Are our 2 questions to distinguish between those animals. So that's one program that's useful for class activities, but it's concerned completely with textual information. Questions and answers, words. Now I have another program here called Logo, which, while it's still useful for class discussion and stimulation, is mainly a graphical program, because it concerns what shapes and patterns and effects you can create on the screen using simple graphical commands. It's concerned with the activities of a turtle, which you'll see in the middle of the screen here. Here's the turtle, and here's his universe. And by entering the right commands, we can get our turtle to walk around his universe, leaving a trail behind him. Let's try a simple forward command. We'll go forward 200. As you can see, the turtle has gone forward 200 and left a line behind. We can get him to turn. Let's make him go left 90 degrees. Left 90. Now if we go forward again, forward 400 this time, we can see the line he's drawn in a westerly direction. So at the very simplest level, we have a tool where we can experiment with different lengths and their relationships, angles and directions. Now the power of Logo comes because we are allowed to define our own terms. Let's clear the screen. And we can imagine saying to the children, we want the turtle to draw a triangle, or a square, or any other shape. Let's start with a triangle. We need him to go forward, we need him to turn, so that he can go down in that direction, turn again, and come back. Well, let's look at the commands we'd need to make him do that. We might go forward 200. Let's suppose we made him go right 60. Forward 200 again. We can immediately see our mistake. Although triangles have 60 degrees between their sides, in order to get from that direction round to that direction, we don't need to go 60, we need to go 120. Having worked out the basic principles, then we can sit down and define triangle. Here I've given the list of instructions necessary to explain to the turtle how to make a triangle. Having provided that set of instructions, I can now use the word triangle as a single instruction. I just type triangle, and automatically the turtle does a triangle. If I now go back a little way by entering back 50, the turtle reverses down the screen. And then I can draw another triangle. Now we can expand on this by designing a new shape in terms of the shapes we already have. Let's call this one a pattern. And we're going to explain how to make a pattern. We'll start it with a triangle. We'll then turn right through 90 degrees. And we'll draw another triangle. And that's the end. A triangle, turn right through 90 degrees, another triangle. Let's see if it works. We now just type pat, a triangle, turn, and another triangle. If we typed pat again, our figure would be increased. So we can build up shapes of quite complex dimensions by combining together words, each of which describes a simple shape. Now, we only looked then at a couple of the facilities within the Logo language. In fact, it's quite a large and complicated language, but the beauty of it is that you can start in a very simple way, using simple commands one at a time, and build up to quite complex effects. This means that children can each work by themselves to a certain extent, perhaps with squared paper or with ordinary paper, designing how to draw a shape, how to write the first letter of their name. And then when they think they've worked out the series of instructions necessary, they can try it on the computer. Now, the two programs we've looked at, Logo and Tree of Knowledge, both test creative abilities. They allow the students to think in new ways, apply new types of logical thought. But of course there is a place for the computer in the more mundane activities of the primary classroom, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Let's look at another program that deals with the very basics of arithmetic: number bonds, number pairs, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's called Number Balance. I've chosen this particular program to show you not because addition and subtraction are anything particularly complicated or unusual, but the program does exhibit some very important points about tailoring computerized education to the way you normally do your teaching. Let's work our way through it, and I'll point out the things I mean. The program starts with a set of teacher's notes. We'll skip over those. We'll come on to the first important point on this idea of tailoring a program. The program is going to test children in their ability to add numbers together. And we're given a choice of 3 different formats of question. Given two numbers, what do they add up to, or what's the difference between them? Given one number and the answer, what's the missing number that must be added or subtracted to give that answer? Given the answer and this number, what number goes here to make the sum correct? Or a mixture of these two, or a mixture of all three formats. So if you normally ask your questions in a certain way, then this program does give you the choice of which way the computer will put its questions. We'll go for the simplest way, choice number 1, and press C to continue. Another choice, do we want addition only, subtraction only, or both? Well, let's stay simple and we'll stick with addition. Now we have a choice of the highest bond we're going to use, up to 20. Let's go for the maximum. We'll type 20. And because this is one case where the return key must be pressed to end a number, we're reminded of that in the instructions. Another good point to look out for. A choice of random bonds up to the limit we specified, or fixed bonds at that limit. We'll go for random bonds. And because this program is designed to be used with a series of children, one after the other, we give them all the same amount of time to answer their questions. Let's take 30 seconds. It's very short, but it will allow us to run through a couple of examples. Now that's the end of the teachers section of the program. It's at this point that the individual child would sit down and be asked to type in his name. An immediate response comes back using the child's name, and the flashing C reminds us how to get on to the next stage. Nice clear presentation. We asked for the question format with two numbers on the left-hand side and the unknown on the right-hand side. Flashing question mark tells us where our answer is going. If we press 8, we get a nice big green tick to show that we were right. And although you didn't see it, as soon as I pressed the 8 key, that was taken as my answer. I didn't have to press return. 3 plus 3, 6. Again, the balance comes horizontal, and I got it right. A summary of how well I did within the allotted time. I got 2 right, no mistakes. I took so long because I was talking to you about the individual things I was doing. Let's try another pupil. Let's use Paul. And this time, let's get some of them wrong. 7 plus 1, 9. The balance overbalances, across, and also an audible response. If I get it wrong again, still the balance is not horizontal, and I'm given the correct answer. 7 plus 1 equals 8. And to make sure that I've got time to read that correct answer, the program waits for me to respond. Time up, 2 mistakes. If I now press R for results, then, although you may think it's rather like an arcade game with a high score league, it gives you a summary of all the children who've taken the test, how well they did, and also a reminder for the teacher as to which format was being used for that particular test. I can now go on to another pupil by pressing P. Let's say Anne. And the next pupil can go on and get as many as he or she can correct within the allotted time. And it's at a time like this that one other piece of hardware is very valuable, and that's a printer. Because a table of results like this, the program can be modified to print that table not only on the screen, but on the printer. So here you have a permanent record of how well each child did on a certain occasion. So that's an example of a program to be used by one child or a series of children, one after the other, in order to drill them, to practice their number work. But there are class exercises that we can do using the computer on the subject of number work. I've written a program here, which in fact we'll copy onto the cassette so that you can use yourselves, which takes the 100 square, something that you're familiar with using as a physical visual aid, and transfers it to the computer to help to speed things up. I'll give you a little demonstration of it now. Here we have a standard 10 by 10 grid in which we're used to filling in the numbers from 1 to 100. And at the bottom you see a list of options. The first one, A, fill in all the numbers. So there's a nice simple starting point. If we want to rub out all the numbers, start again, we can do that very easily. If we want to discuss the effect of multiples, then the program allows us to press M and asks us of which number we want to fill in the multiples. If we ask for the multiples of 5, then the multiples of 5 are emphasized. Again, we can rub out all multiples of 10 to show the effect on the grid. So this allows us to do the sort of things that we would do with a full-size cardboard grid or one chalked on the board. But it's a lot faster, and in some ways it can be more flexible. I've only produced a very basic version of the program, but it would be very simple to extend it, to allow different combinations to be inserted, to allow children to type in their own numbers, to try and see if they could match up, for example, with the multiples of a certain number. If we fill in the multiples, for example, of 2, we can then rub out all the multiples of 4. And a small change to the program would allow the student to do this manually himself and have the program check that he was doing it correctly. And you'll see that the 5th option on that list at the bottom is games. The program includes a couple of games which you'll be able to experiment with if you copy the program from this video cassette to your own cassette recorder, which give practice in a more light-hearted way at moving around the 100 square. Another area where the computer can help in the classroom is with drilling with spellings. Now, I had a child who was a very bad speller at school, but it was very difficult at home to try to make him do any extra work to practice his spellings. So I wrote him a program, and I called it Superword. And he spent a lot of time just trying to get 100% as his final score on Superword. I took the first 3 headings from his school books and filled the program with the sort of words he was getting wrong. Let's see how the program works. Let's try number 3, English. We're given a word, the word's taken away, and we have to practice typing it. Journey. If we get it wrong, a rude noise, a request to try again, and another look at the word. The time delay is adjustable, so we can let the child see the word for as long or as short a time as we want. When the word's been correctly spelt, it's shown again, together with a colored block indicating the shape of the word. Another one? Yes, let's have another one. Cousins. Exactly the same procedure is followed. you have to be careful in a program like this that the child doesn't try to cheat. Let's show you what I did to try to avoid the child typing in the word as soon as it was on the screen. Let's take another one. Playing. Now, although I'd typed P-L-A-Y while the word was still on the screen, the program won't accept any input until the word's been rubbed out. So all I have left is the Y. I have to delete that and type the whole word again. Now, so far there's been no scoring, no evaluation. It's just practice at spelling those particular words. When we finally say we don't want another one, the words are displayed, and because I've got a printer attached, I've had the words printed out. The child has a final chance to check the words and make sure he's written them down correctly. The test, journey, cousins, and playing. The test does require the help of somebody else, but all the learning, all the preliminary work has been done by the child with the computer. A final score, 100%, always gives the child something to aim for, always to get that magic 100% figure. So there's another example of a computer program being used to help to drill a child in an area where that child is weak. As I say, I wrote that program for one of my children, and we have about 450 words in there. But we'll copy that program onto the soundtrack of this video cassette so that you can copy it into your own computer, and if you feel like using it, then you can change the word lists very easily. And there'll be instructions within the program to tell you how to do that. Now, you've looked at several different pieces of software during this videotape. And you may be asking yourself the question, well, where do I get all these programs? Well, some of them you'll get free from your local education authority. Some of them you can get through educational users, either free or at a fairly nominal cost. You can, of course, write your own programs if you're willing to take the trouble to learn how to write in BASIC or in any of the other languages. But I'd like to mention one particular source of programs and of information about computers that will be growing very much during the next few years. And this is the idea of telesoftware. That's programs sent down the telephone line. Micronet 800 is a part of Prestel reserved for users of small computers. The first computer to be allowed access to Prestel through this method was the BBC microcomputer. Here you see the frame that tells you you've just logged on through your telephone line into Prestel through Micronet 800. Prestel is based upon indexes, and by following the indexes in the right order, you can get to the part of the database you want. Here we've come to the education section of the database, and the screen now tells you what sort of information you're going to find in that part of Prestel. As you can see, there's news and information about computers, and there's also a selection of programs which can be copied down the telephone line into your own computer. Now, we've taken the choice that moves us to the part of the database containing telesoftware, programs to be transmitted from Prestel to our computer. And you can see that the BBC microcomputer is top of that list. Well, let's see what programs there are on the database for us. Now, from the list of programs available for the BBC Micro, I selected this one, a mental arithmetic testing program. Now, this first page is free, and it tells me a little about the program. Notice, however, that this program does have a cost of 60p. If I want to continue on and load this program into my computer, then I can just press the return key and we can start the loading process. This is the last frame we'd see before we downloaded the program into our own computer. Near the top it says number of frames 7, and we'll be able to make a quick visual check as each of those frames is transmitted to us. So I'll start the telesoftware routine to download the program. There's the message, download, asking me to confirm. I say yes. And these frames full of completely unreadable text are the program being downloaded. The program is now copied into my computer, but to be safe, I should now save it onto cassette. And here's the program executing. I've got a copy of it in my computer, and I also have a copy on cassette tape so that I can use the program again whenever I want to. It's a fairly standard mental arithmetic program, but we better just check that it does work. So let's put 5 questions to be attempted at each level. 2 plus 5, 7. Correct. 2 minus 1, 1. Correct. The program does seem to work. There are many organizations which put information onto Prestel, and one of them is the Council for Educational Technology. And this is their front page, page 211 on Prestel. And this is part of their index, showing some of the information that they keep on Prestel. As you can see, there's a fairly wide range of subjects, and we've only covered the alphabet up to E. So with a link into this system, not only can you acquire copies of programs which you can use in your own environment, but you can also seek out lots of information about a wide range of subjects. Well, I hope that during the last hour or so we've been able to answer some of your questions about computers, and we've been able to give you some ideas about what you can or perhaps can't do with a BBC microcomputer in the classroom. Now, as I said, we're going to give you 2 programs with this video cassette. They're recorded on the soundtrack following this session. If you connect the headphone socket or the line-out socket of your video cassette player to the mic-in or line-in socket on the cassette recorder you use with the computer, you'll be able to copy those programs onto a normal audio cassette. And then if you want to use them within your own classroom environment, you'll have them available. So, the best of luck with your use of computers, and I hope you get as much fun from them as I do. Meanwhile, I'll get back to my mental arithmetic test.